The signature. Part 1. The erasure. Sarah Mitchell's badge beeped at the entrance of Apex Solutions' gleaming headquarters in downtown Seattle. The sound had always felt like a small victory, a confirmation that she belonged here, in this temple of glass and ambition that she'd helped build from nothing. 7 years ago, this building didn't exist. 7 years ago, Apex was 3 people in a cramped WeWork space, surviving on ramen and delusion. Now it was worth $300 million. She stepped into the elevator, her reflection staring back from the polished steel doors. 34 years old, blonde hair pulled into a practical bun, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. She looked tired. She was tired. But today was the quarterly review, and she'd prepared a presentation on the new client acquisition strategy that could push them into the Fortune 500 within 2 years. The elevator climbed to the executive floor, the 14th, though everyone called it Olympus behind closed doors. Sarah had named it that as a joke during the early days, back when irony still existed in this place, back when they were still friends. The reception area was empty except for Brenda, the executive assistant, who looked up from her computer with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. Pity? Discomfort? Sarah, Brenda said, her voice careful. They're waiting for you in conference room A. Not the boardroom. Conference room A was small, windowless. The room where they fired people. Sarah's stomach dropped, but she kept her face neutral. Thanks, Brenda. The walk down the hall felt endless. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step an accusation. Through the glass walls, she could see her colleagues, people she'd hired, trained, trusted, studiously avoiding eye contact. Marcus from engineering suddenly found his phone fascinating. Jennifer from marketing turned away entirely. They knew. Conference room A was exactly as suffocating as she remembered. Sitting at the table were 3 people. Patricia Valdez from HR, a woman Sarah never liked but always respected. David Chen, the current CEO who joined 2 years ago when the venture capital money started flowing, and their lawyer, whose name Sarah couldn't remember. Some shark in an expensive suit. No one stood when she entered. No one smiled. Patricia said, gesturing to the single chair positioned opposite the 3 of them, an interrogation setup. How theatrical. Sarah remained standing. I'd rather not. Patricia's lips thinned. This will be brief. Effective immediately, your employment with Apex Solutions is terminated. The words hung in the air like a slap that hadn't quite landed yet. Sarah heard them, understood them, but her brain refused to process them as real. I'm sorry, what? Your position has been made redundant, David said, not meeting her eyes. David, who'd pitched her for the CEO role, who'd convinced her to step aside for someone with more operational experience. David, who'd smiled at every board meeting while systematically dismantling everything she'd built. The company is moving in a new direction, and your skill set no longer aligns with our strategic objectives. My skill set? Sarah's voice was very quiet. My skill set built this company? That's simply not accurate, Patricia interjected, opening a folder. According to our records, you've been underperforming for the past 18 months, multiple complaints about your management style, failure to meet KPIs. Your team has reported you as difficult to work with. That's bullshit. The profanity felt good, like breaking glass. Show me one complaint, one KPI I missed, one team member who actually said that to my face. We're not here to debate this, the lawyer said smoothly. We're here to inform you of our decision and discuss the terms of your departure. Sarah laughed, a sharp sound without humor. Terms, right. And what are these generous terms? Patricia slid a packet across the table. 3 months severance, continued health insurance for 6 months, a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of your departure, and a non-compete clause preventing you from working in the industry for 2 years. Sarah picked up the packet, her hands surprisingly steady. She flipped through it quickly, lawyers speak blurring together, until she reached the signature page. "And if I don't sign?" "Then you get nothing," David said. "No severance, no insurance, and we'll make sure everyone in the industry knows exactly why you were let go. Underperformance, toxicity, whatever story serves us best." There it was, the threat, the knife pressed gently against her throat. Sarah set the packet down carefully. "You know what's interesting? I co-founded this company. My name is on the original incorporation documents. I own 17% of this company." "Owned," Patricia corrected. "Past tense. You sold back 15% when we took on Series B funding. Your remaining 2% is non-voting stock, essentially worthless. You have no power here, Sarah. You're not special. You're not irreplaceable. You're just another employee we're choosing to let go. You're not special." The words hit harder than anything else, because somewhere in some small part of herself she'd tried to silence, Sarah had believed she was special, essential, the heart of this place. But looking at these three faces, blank, professional, already thinking about their next meeting, she understood with perfect clarity. They'd already erased her. She was a ghost haunting a building that no longer remembered why it existed. "I need to think about this," Sarah said finally. "You have until end of business today," the lawyer said. "Sign or we move forward without your cooperation." "And my personal items?" "Security will escort you to collect them. You have 30 minutes. They were already standing, already moving toward the door. The meeting was over. 7 years condensed into a 15-minute execution. "Wait," Sarah said, her voice cracking slightly. She hated herself for it, but she had to ask. "David, we started this together. You and me and Marcus. We built this from nothing. How can you just—" David finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than hatred. It was indifference. "Grow up, Sarah. This is business." Part 2. The excavation. The apartment felt too large and too empty. Sarah sat on her couch, $8,000 of Italian leather she'd bought to celebrate the Series A funding, surrounded by the contents of her desk in a pathetic cardboard box. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Founder." A framed photo from the early days. 3 young people grinning in front of a whiteboard covered in terrible ideas. A succulent that was already dying. Her laptop sat closed on the coffee table, a severance of a different kind. They'd kept her work computer, of course, wiped her access to everything in the time it took security to escort her out. She watched James from IT delete her credentials in real time, his face carefully neutral, and felt something fundamental break inside her chest. Her phone buzzed. Another message in the group chat she hadn't been removed from yet. "Marcus, heard what happened. That's fucked up." Jennifer, totally fucked up. Ryan, we should do something. But no one would do anything. She knew that. They had mortgages and student loans and children in daycare. They had every reason to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Sarah opened her laptop, her personal one, the one Apex couldn't touch, and stared at the screen. Her email was already filling with automated unsubscribe notifications, the corporate newsletter, the benefits portal, the all-hands meeting invitations. Each one a small death, a confirmation of absence. She clicked through to her personal files, the archive she'd kept of everything, because Sarah Mitchell hadn't been a casual founder who showed up to sign papers and cash checks. She'd been obsessive, paranoid, smart enough to know that startups were built on shifting sand and broken promises. She had copies of everything. The original incorporation documents from 2018, the operating agreement, the licensing applications for the proprietary software that was the entire foundation of Apex's business model, the patents pending, the regulatory filings with the Washington Secretary of State. And there, in a folder she hadn't opened in 3 years, the document that made her heart stop. Master Software License Agreement, Apex Solutions. She'd written most of the code in the early days, back when engineering team meant her and a freelancer named Doug, who smelled like weed and genius. The facial recognition algorithm that corporate clients paid millions to license. the predictive analytics engine, the data processing pipeline that could handle billions of transactions. But the license, the legal permission for Apex to actually use and distribute that software, that required signatures from all founding members. Her signature, Marcus's signature, David's signature. And according to the agreement, the license required annual renewal by all original signatories. A formality, obviously, something they'd done every year in about 30 seconds, usually via DocuSign while half-watching Netflix. Except, Sarah clicked through to her email archive, searching for the renewal notification. Last year's renewal had been in March 15th, to be exact. Today was November 4th. The renewal would have been due in March of this year. She searched her email, nothing. She checked her spam folder, nothing. She logged into the DocuSign portal, no pending documents. She sat back, her mind racing. They hadn't sent her the renewal. Either they'd forgotten, unlikely, given how anal Patricia was about documentation, or they'd deliberately excluded her, assuming her 2% non-voting stock meant she had no rights. But the master license agreement predated all of that. It was foundational, constitutional, and according to its terms, if any founding signatory failed to renew, the license became invalid after a 90-day grace period. Sarah did the math. March 15th plus 90 days was June 15th. It was now November. The license had been invalid for nearly 5 months. Apex Solutions, the $300 million darling of the tech industry, had been operating without legal authorization to use its own software. Every contract they'd signed, every client they'd onboarded, every dollar they'd made, all of it potentially voidable. And they had no idea. Sarah closed her laptop very slowly, her hands shaking. Not from fear, from something darker and more electric. Power. Purpose. They'd called her useless, redundant, erased. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. Part 3. The Architecture of Patience. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Sarah's life, and that included the year she'd worked 90-hour weeks to keep Apex alive when the banks wouldn't give them a line of credit. She wanted to scream, to call David and Patricia and every board member and tell them exactly how badly they'd fucked up, to watch them panic and grovel and beg her to fix their catastrophic mistake. But that would be stupid. Instead, she became a ghost. She declined calls from former colleagues who wanted to grab coffee, read, mine her for gossip. She ignored LinkedIn messages from recruiters. She told her few real friends she was taking time off to travel, to heal, to figure out her next move. And then she went to work. First, she needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, someone vicious, someone who understood both technology law and the beautiful brutality of contract disputes. She found Yolanda Harris, a woman with a reputation for making tech CEOs cry in depositions. Yolanda charged $900 an hour. She paid the retainer with her severance money and felt nothing but joy. "This is extraordinary," Yolanda said during their first meeting, reading through the licensing agreement on her iPad. She was 50-something, black, with silver-streaked locks and the kind of calm intensity that made people confess to crimes they didn't commit. She'd basically just forgotten about you? Apparently, I wasn't important enough to remember, Sarah said. Yolanda smiled. It was not a kind smile. How much do you know about license revocation procedures? Assume I know nothing. Smart woman. Yolanda pulled up a fresh document. According to the terms you agreed to, any founding signatory has the unilateral right to revoke the license with 90 days written notice. That notice has to be sent to all stakeholders, the other founders, the board of directors, major investors. After 90 days, the revocation becomes effective, and the company loses all rights to use, distribute, or profit from the software. Can they fight it? They can try, but contracts are contracts. You signed this in good faith when the company was founded. They changed the terms of your employment and your equity stake, but they never modified the underlying license agreement. Legally, you still have the same rights you had on day one. Yolanda leaned forward. The question is, what do you want? Sarah had been thinking about that for 2 weeks. At night, when she couldn't sleep, she ran scenarios. Revenge was satisfying but ultimately empty. Money was practical but insufficient. What she wanted was something more fundamental. I want them to understand what they did, she said, finally. I want them to feel the way they made me feel. Small, powerless, erased. And then I want them to pay me enough money that I never have to work again. Yolanda nodded slowly. Then here's what we're going to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would send the revocation notice exactly 90 days before Apex's largest contract was set to renew, $120 million deal with a major healthcare consortium that represented nearly 40% of Apex's revenue. The timing would create maximum chaos and minimum room for negotiation. But first, they had to wait, because the healthcare contract renewed in March, which meant they needed to send the notice in December, which meant Sarah had 6 more weeks of patience to endure. She spent that time doing research. She pulled every public filing, every press release, every analyst report about Apex. She watched David give interviews about disrupting the industry and building sustainable growth. She read Patricia's LinkedIn posts about creating inclusive workplace culture. Each piece of propaganda made her jaw ache from clenching. But she also started to see the cracks. Apex was growing fast, too fast. They'd hired 300 people in the last year. They'd opened offices in Austin and Boston. They'd promised investors a 20% quarter-over-quarter revenue increase. They were overextended, vulnerable. One major shock would cascade through the entire system. Sarah was about to become that shock. On December 1st, Yolanda sent the revocation notice via certified mail, email, and courier. Copies went to David, Marcus, Patricia, all 7 board members, and the 5 largest investors. The letter was brief and professional. Dear stakeholders, pursuant to Section 7.3 of the Master Software License Agreement, dated March 15, 2018, I hereby provide 90 days notice of my intention to revoke Apex Solutions' license to use, distribute, and profit from the proprietary software systems designated therein. Effective March 1, 2026, Apex Solutions will no longer have legal authorization to operate its core business functions without negotiating a new licensing agreement. Regards, Sarah Mitchell, co-founder, Apex Solutions. Then, Sarah turned off her phone, poured herself a glass of wine, and waited for the world to end. The first call came within an hour, then 10 more, then 50. By the end of day 1, Sarah had 300 missed calls, and her voicemail was full. She didn't answer any of them. On day 2, someone leaked the notice to TechCrunch. The headline was perfect. Apex Solutions faces existential crisis after founder revokes software license. The article was gleeful in its speculation. Within hours, Apex's private market valuation dropped 15%. On day 3, David showed up at her apartment. She watched him through the doorbell camera, pacing in the hallway, running his hands through his hair. He looked like shit. Good. She opened the door, but kept the chain on. You're trespassing. Sarah, please, we need to talk. No, we don't. The board is panicking. Investors are threatening to pull funding. We have clients demanding explanations. Sounds like you have a problem. This isn't a fucking game. David's composure cracked, his voice rising. You could destroy everything. Hundreds of jobs, millions of dollars, 7 years of work. My work, Sarah said quietly. My code, my algorithms, my late nights and panic attacks and sacrificed relationships. I built that software. You just sold it. We gave you equity. We made you rich. You took my equity. You fired me. You told me I was useless. Now you get to find out exactly how useless I am. She closed the door. David pounded on it twice, then stopped. She heard him collapse against the wall, a broken sound escaping his throat. She felt nothing. That was the strangest part. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a cold, clean certainty that this was right. On day 10, Marcus tried to broker peace. He sent a text. "Can we please talk like adults? This is insane." Sarah replied, "You sat there and watched them fire me. You did nothing. We have nothing to talk about." On day 15, the board made their first official offer, $5 million to withdraw the revocation. Yolanda laughed when she read it. "Insult them back. Ask for 50. They countered at 10. Sarah said 25. They settled on 20, plus full restoration of her original equity stake with voting rights, plus a formal public apology, plus David's resignation. The board refused the last term. David was their golden boy, their future. Fine. The deadline ticked closer. On day 60, with 30 days remaining, the healthcare consortium announced they were putting their contract renewal under review pending legal clarification. Apex's stock price, still privately traded but closely watched, dropped another 20%. The vultures began circling. Competitors started calling Apex's clients, offering migration deals. Employees started updating their LinkedIn profiles. Trade publications published think pieces about founder dynamics and the importance of documentation. Sarah read every word. She was mentioned in all of them, sometimes as the villain, sometimes as the victim, always as the ghost in the machine who'd finally learned to haunt back. On day 75, Patricia called. Sarah answered this time, on speaker with Yolanda present. "What do you want?" Patricia's voice was stripped of all professional veneer. She sounded desperate. "Seriously, Sarah, name your price." "I did. You said no. We'll give you 30 million. And David will step down and will issue a statement saying the separation was mutual. You can have everything, almost everything," Sarah corrected. "But not the apology. A real one. Not corporate speak. I want David and you and every person in that conference room to admit publicly that you were wrong, that you underestimated me, that you tried to erase me, and it almost destroyed the company." Silence. Long enough that Sarah checked to see if the call had dropped. "That's not possible," Patricia said finally. "The liability. Then we proceed to March 1st. Your choice." Patricia hung up. On day 89, with 1 day remaining, Sarah received a video message. It was David, sitting in what looked like an empty office. He hadn't shaved in weeks. His eyes were red. "You were right. About everything. We built this together, and then I let them convince me you didn't matter. I let them erase you. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, Sarah." He looked destroyed. Broken. Exactly as broken as she'd felt sitting in conference room A, being told she was redundant. Sarah watched the video 3 times. Then she deleted it. Part 5. The Reckoning. On March 1st, at exactly 12:01 a.m., Sarah's license revocation became legally effective. Apex Solutions' entire operation became, technically, one massive copyright violation. At 8 a.m., the board announced an emergency restructuring. David Chen was resigning as CEO, effective immediately. Sarah Mitchell was returning to the company as Chief Technology Officer, with full equity restoration, a seat on the board, and a compensation package that made her one of the highest-paid executives in Seattle. At 9 a.m., the company released a statement. Apex Solutions acknowledges that we failed to properly recognize the foundational contributions of co-founder Sarah Mitchell. Her vision and technical expertise built the core software that powers our business. We deeply regret our mistakes and are committed to ensuring this never happens again. We are grateful that Ms. Mitchell has chosen to return in a leadership capacity. At 10 a.m., Sarah walked back into the Apex building. The same security guard who'd escorted her out 5 months ago now held the door open. The same receptionist who'd avoided her eyes now smiled nervously. The same colleagues who'd pretended not to know her now clustered in the lobby, unsure whether to applaud or apologize. Sarah walked past all of them without a word. The boardroom was full. 7 board members, 5 major investors, the entire executive team. And Patricia, sitting in the corner, her face carefully blank. "Miss Mitchell," said Richard Townsend, the board chair, "welcome back. We're ready to discuss the terms of the new licensing agreement." Sarah set her bag down and took the seat at the head of the table, the CEO's chair. "No, you're not. But you will be." She opened her laptop and pulled up a presentation. The first slide was simple. Rebuild. Here's what's going to happen. I'm not just coming back as CTO. I'm coming back to fix what you broke. The culture, the mission, the reason this company existed in the first place. "With respect," one of the investors started. "I'm not finished." Sarah's voice was steel. "You wanted to play games with people's lives. You wanted to treat your employees as disposable. You wanted to build a company based on exploitation and arrogance. That ends now." She clicked to the next slide, a comprehensive restructuring plan. Employee ownership programs, transparent salary bands, mandatory equity for everyone who'd been with the company more than 2 years. "This is corporate suicide," Patricia said quietly. "The profit margins will be smaller," Sarah agreed, "but sustainable. You'll grow slower, make less money, and actually create something worth building." "And if we refuse?" Richard asked. Sarah smiled. "Then I walk, and I take my license with me. And you can explain to your investors why you let a $300 million company collapse because you couldn't admit you were wrong." The silence was absolute. "We'll need time to review this," Richard said finally. "You have 48 hours. The license agreement I'm offering is contingent on these terms. All of them." Sarah closed her laptop. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you how this works now." She stood to leave, then paused. Patricia was staring at her with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "You told me I wasn't special, that I wasn't irreplaceable. You were wrong. But you know what? You taught me something important. In this world, your value isn't what people tell you it is. It's what you can prove when they try to take everything away." She walked out. Nobody followed. Epilogue. The foundation. 6 months later, Apex Solutions looked different, felt different. The same building, the same technology, but something fundamental had shifted in its DNA. Sarah's reforms had been painful. 3 board members resigned. 2 major investors sold their stakes. Patricia Valdez left to join a competitor, and nobody at Apex mourned her departure. But the employees who stayed, the ones who believed in building something real, they flourished. The new equity program meant that administrative assistants and junior engineers suddenly had skin in the game. The transparent salary bands exposed and corrected years of pay inequality. The culture shifted from cutthroat to collaborative. Revenue growth slowed, just as Sarah had predicted, but customer satisfaction increased. Employee retention hit 93%. And the company started being mentioned not just for its technology, but for its values. Sarah kept her office simple: a desk, a chair, a window overlooking the city. On the wall was a single-framed document, the original Master Software License Agreement, signed by 3 naive founders who'd thought they were just starting a company. She looked at it sometimes and remembered the woman who'd signed it. Young, brilliant, convinced that merit and hard work were enough. That woman had been right about the work, wrong about the world. But she'd learned. God, had she learned. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus, who'd managed to keep his job by staying quiet and doing good work. "Coffee tomorrow? Real talk, no bullshit." Sarah considered it, then typed back, "Sure, but you're buying." Because some wounds could heal, some bridges could be rebuilt, but the foundation had to be solid first, built on truth, not convenience, on respect, not exploitation. She turned back to her computer, to the code she was writing for Apex's next generation of software. Better algorithms, smarter systems, the kind of innovation that could only come from someone who'd been to the bottom and clawed their way back up. Someone who'd learned that being erased doesn't mean you're gone. It just means you have the element of the surprise. And in the end, that was everything. $300 million. An entire company, hundreds of jobs and futures and dreams. All of it had teetered on the edge because three people in a conference room decided one woman didn't matter. They'd been wrong, and Sarah Mitchell had the signature to prove it.